accessed the podcast of OA. Located deep within Sector 14845 and powered by the Emerald Light of Will, the podcast of OA is your guide to the Green Lantern universe. Hosted by Lantern Myron Rumsey, the podcast of OA begins now.
Hey, fellow Owens, welcome to episode number 189 of the podcast of OA. We've got a packed episode this time around. We're going to be talking about the final issue of the Grant Morrison Liam Sharp run, and we've got a bunch of listener feedback, and, I'm really excited. This is Myron Rumsey. I'm joined by our good friend Phil Bova. Phil, I don't know about you, but I haven't had such a great week, and I've been looking forward to chatting with you and creating some content to share with our fellow Green Lantern fans and talking about the end of this amazing run.
I know. I was looking forward to doing this, recording this last night, of course, which would have been the same day release as issue 12. But unfortunately, I was a little under the weather, so we had to delay it till this evening. But I'm all good to go. I'm feeling great, and I was looking forward to recording as well. And it's going to be a really good episode. There's a lot of good stuff I've read out there about the last issue, so there's a lot to talk about.
I actually kind of like that we took a little bit of an extra pause because this issue has a lot to say, and I'm still trying to figure out how I'm going to do my review because there's a lot here, and I'm still trying to unpack some of the things that are in it. And like you, I've checked to see what some of our fellow Green Lantern fans have been saying, just to try to pull some of that perspective into it. So I'm really excited to talk about the issue, and it's kind of a bittersweet thing because it's the end of the run, and we don't know what's in store for Hal Jordan after the series is over. But speaking of that, Josh Williamson recently was talking about a bunch of things on the Multiversity podcast. And another question came up about, is there going to be another Green Lantern book? We're going to get more than just the Jeff Thorne book. And his response was that the Jeff Thorne series will be the only Green Lantern book for the time being. Which kind of flies in the face of what he said before, because he said something about that there were plans for Hal, and maybe there still are. Maybe it's just further down the road, and they want to give this book a chance to get itself situated. I don't know. What's your thoughts?
I had an interesting, a friend of mine, Brian, he had texted me a good point about, this being the last Hal Jordan issue, and how they probably just want to focus on other Green Lanterns. And and to be fair, you and I have always argued that point, of having a book that, that helped focus on other characters and stuff. The sad part about this one is, we're both diehard Hal Jordan fans, so we're suffering the fate of our own our own statements when we make that claim. And and maybe that's just where this is right now, that the focus has been on Hal Jordan for 2 years, and maybe it's shifted to where they're going to focus on something else for the time being, and unfortunately we're going to be the ones who are going to have to suffer.
Yeah, it's interesting. Hal may have gotten his own book, but some of the other characters have certainly had their opportunities to do things as well. So I feel sorry for the characters that aren't getting any time, like all the Kyle fans and the Guy fans, because they really haven't had much of anything. I feel sorry for them, but at the same time, you and I have talked about it before. Hal is, the Green Lantern universe was built on his shoulders, and we've gone deviating from having Hal in the center seat on again and off again over the last, how many years has it been since 1959? I mean, you've had kind of some moments back and forth. It always ends up coming back to Hal, and there's a reason why, and maybe that'll happen again. I imagine it will, but we'll see. We'll see. Speaking of Jeff Thorne, he posted recently on Twitter some artwork. He's been doing some artwork, and he did a Hal Jordan image, and somebody responded to him. Somebody that I follow on Twitter responded to him and asked him if he drew it on cardboard. And Thorne got kind of uppity because he kind of got called in that whole controversy thing. And the guy, Thorne was kind of like strike one, you're 2 more and you're out, which I thought was a little, considering some of the things he said. How dare you, have somebody else have an opinion that's contrary to yours? But I thought it was kind of funny because I thought it was a great little comment, and he wasn't meaning it as a dig at him. He was just trying to make light of the whole thing. But Thorne didn't take it. He kind of got uppity, and I kind of wonder if maybe he's gotten a talking to by DC. I don't know, but who knows? But I thought it was humorous.
I think I mean, you can only be. I don't know. I have a feeling that somewhere along the way that a lot of the fandom probably was an uproar about some of his commentary, and maybe he got a slap on the wrist. I mean, it's not unheard of, and it would make sense for WB to do so, or not WB, for the comic industry to do something like that. So maybe he did. Maybe he bit too many fans, and we talked about it in one of our episodes.
Yeah, I travel a lot of different circles, and I hear a lot of commentary, and he, despite trying to minimize it, he has taken some negative reaction from the fans, that's for sure. But anyway, the other thing that is out there, I don't know whether you saw this, Phil, but did you see the storyboards for Zack Snyder's Justice League 3-part movie series?
I have.
So it's kind of interesting. Some of the artwork, they don't mention Hal by name, but there's references to Green Lantern, and all the artwork is of Hal when you see it. And then there's some artwork that shows Kilowog as well, which was pretty cool. I'm not sure I was really into the narrative of what he was going to do. Basically, you're going to see Hal show up supposedly if this had gone into making a movie trilogy, and they would have created the relationship between Hal and Barry. At one point, Barry kind of saves Hal, or Hal saves Barry. I can't remember now just which way it was. And then at one point, Hal was going to get his arm destroyed by Superman, and then it was going to come back because there was going to be a whole time travel thing. Kind of interesting. I don't really know what to make of it, and it's really kind of a moot point because we know that these movies are never going to get made. But it was interesting to see what his vision was.
It is. It was probably pretty massive. It's a shame on what might have been, kind of thing. And March 18th, us fans are going to get a dose of what would have been or what might have been at the time. But the bigger scheme of things, I highly doubt that WB moving forward would do anything that's going to be Snyder related. I think this is going to be his coup d'etat, I guess you can say, his last calling with this kind of film. And I think it's going to be a good one. I'm looking forward to it. I'm totally stoked.
I'm excited to see what happens. I want to see it, but people are starting to say restore the Snyderverse, like they're going to do more, and I don't see that happening at all.
I mean, you start one movement, and my wife and I were talking about these little movements that pop up and stuff like that, and this one just, I don't know, this one must have taken on a life of its own. But lightning doesn't strike twice, and I don't know. I mean, there's no wrong in like releasing versions of films from directors. It's like the Ayer cut, released the Ayer cut, which was the Suicide Squad movie and stuff. But at the same time, are you moving forward, or are you just re-releasing stuff just for releasing's sake?
Right. I mean, I don't know whether you saw the Donner cut of Superman 2.
Oh, yeah.
But, that was always interesting because, again, that was a case of a director whose vision was cut short. Obviously, his situation was somewhat different than Zack Snyder's, but it's a case of a vision that wasn't completed. And so you get to see what the original plan was, which is kind of a cool thing. And that's what I'm looking forward to in the Snyderverse. I want to see what's different. I want to see what I like better about it, because there are things about the Whedon version that I did like, but there were also a fair number of things that I didn't care about seeing. And I'm really interested in seeing what the original vision was. I think that the Justice League movie was created in the worst situation possible, where, Zack Snyder's daughter killed herself, and such a horrible tragedy. And it derailed a creative effort. That's one thing, but the family tragedy certainly trumps all of that. But the impact it had on the film is more than substantial. I mean, there were things obviously going on with that movie behind the scenes that we kind of hear some things about, but to be able to see the vision that Zack Snyder had, and to see his vision the way he wanted it, and see what his creation was going to be, more fully fleshed out, I think he deserves that, and I think it's a sense of closure for everybody involved, and we'll see. We'll see whether we like it or not like it. I have a feeling that we're going to overall think it's a better version of the film, but that's just me.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the temperament following this. It's like the last one. I mean, I liked the last one. I enjoyed it. It had its moments, like you said. The one thing I'm going to finally be glad to be put to rest is the whole lip thing with Superman, in his face, and that Jesus. I mean, I was so tired of seeing that. But at the same time, it's like there's people that are talking about well, how many more new shots are going to be in this film, and it's like okay, do you not realize the fact that the last one clocked at 2 hours and this one's clocking at 4? I mean, you need to ask how many more shots are in this film. It's going to be a totally different narrative.
Right.
I think it, and I think it's going to add more context to a film that was, to me, created in a vacuum just to get pushed out to the general public so they can get money.
Right.
And it was rushed.
They were committed to a deadline, and rather than bring someone who was going to finish what Zack Snyder started, they kind of almost started over midstream, which is not a good thing. And when you talk about things being restored, it isn't so much stuff that they shot after this film was done, but it's stuff that was already in the can that wasn't used.
Yeah.
Because of the change of direction. So we'll see. I'm excited to see it. I'm taking the day off so I can watch it because I don't want to get spoiled by people posting things on the internet. So I don't know whether you saw, but just today there was some footage they showed that was kind of that origin of the battle, the history lesson with Yalen Gur, and there was additional footage of Yalen Gur in there. I'm excited for that. I'm excited to find out. I'm trying not to get my hopes up about seeing Green Lantern in it, seeing Howland or a modern Green Lantern in it. I'm trying to take my hopes up, but at the same time, boy, I really want to see that. I want to see the Unite the Seven payoff.
Not only that, but I'm looking forward to seeing Darkseid. I mean, it's like, I don't know. I mean, we've been so accustomed to Thanos being the big bad and everything like that, and I had posted a couple things on Twitter. With that big old hammer down that Darkseid did in that trailer. I was like, there's no way Thanos could live during that. There's no way Thanos could withstand that hammer. And I also posted something about, there's a difference between why Darkseid would beat Thanos' tail. There's a huge difference. Darkseid doesn't have any emotions, and Thanos does. And Thanos would lose hardcore. And I'm looking forward to this. It's going to be a great movie, and it's going to be cool to see a big baddie like Darkseid. I mean, I've always been a fan of his anyway.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
But anyway, back to the matter at hand. We have the finale, the final issue of the Liam Sharp and Grant Morrison collaboration to talk about. So let's take a minute and gather our thoughts, and we'll be back, and we'll be talking about the Green Lantern Season 2, issue number 12.
This is Salak, Green Lantern of Sector 1418, and you are receiving the podcast of Oa.
The podcast of Oa.
Hello, fellow Owens, and welcome back to another segment of Know Your Core. This week, we got a man by the name of Grumb. Grumb, Grumb. He hails from Space Sector 1198. He was created by Jeff Johns and Ethan Van Sciver, and his first appearance was in Green Lantern Volume 4, Number 4. Grumb was a soldier in the Nameless Army when he was drafted into the Corps, and for the first few months of his life as a Green Lantern, he didn't even have a name. Grumb has dreams of working alongside Kilowog as a trainer. And there you have it, Owens. Another cool member of the Green Lantern Corps, Grumb.
Brightest day, blackest night. No evil shall escape my sight. Let those who worship evil's might beware my power. Green Lantern's life.
All right, my fellow Green Lantern fans, we are at the end of another era. It seems like we've been through a number of eras. We've been through the Johns era, the Venditti era. Now it's the Morrison and Sharp era. I'm not going to just say Morrison because I think Liam Sharp is just as much of the creative process in this series as Grant Morrison. But we're here at the finale. Issue 12, Hal Jordan on Athmora, to deal with the Golden Ones, the Magistry, and Hector Hammond. There is a lot to unpack in this issue, not necessarily because it's hard to follow, but I think there's a lot of commentary that Grant Morrison is making in this issue. So, Phil, my friend, I think when we start talking about this, I think there's so many different ways you can look at this book. I'm really interested to hear what you have to say and what your takeaways was from this issue.
I like how they interplay with Sir Hal, and he's a guardsman green, the Emerald Knight. I like that interplay on what Grant does with the characterization. I thought it was cool when it was used before, and I liked how much more it was used in this issue alone, let alone being the last issue, because I think that's just a cool take on Hal Jordan.
Yeah, I think it's a neat it's a neat take, and we go back to Athmora, and the title of this issue, the whole thing is Space Lawman Hal Jordan faces final doom on a world of living toys, and it's called the Intelligence Engine. And you and I talked in the last episode a little bit about the story behind Athmora, and that it was kind of Abin Sur's, in the Silver Age context, it was Abin Sur's last mission. He was on Athmora there. Grant Morrison kind of taken some liberties here, because we know that during the Jeff Johns era, he kind of redid Abin Sur's final mission, and he was escorting, or he was dealing with Atrocitus in his version of it. And this kind of goes back to Athmora, not necessarily being Abin Sur's final mission, but certainly one of his final missions.
Yeah.
And this is a society or a civilization or a planet which has had their evolutionary processes stymied by this intelligence engine. And if you go back to issue 9, when we first saw Athmora, when Hal first went there, they actually mentioned the intelligence engine in that issue. And I, of course, at the time made no big deal out of it, but today I went back and pulled that issue out to read through it to see if I could glean anything out of that initial story. And I did see the intelligence engine mentioned there. So obviously, in Grant Morrison's process, he has mapped out a lot of this stuff, because nothing is a surprise. Nothing is just being created for the sake of being created. So that was interesting. And Liam Sharp just completely. The man is a wild man as far as I'm concerned. He completely. I think you mentioned it on Twitter really well, that he kind of redefined it a little bit. He's just done something fantastic. This has got to be. I don't know his entire body of his work, but this man just put so much on every page that I have so much respect for him. And you and I got the chance to talk to him. We were fortunate enough to have him on the show a number of episodes back, and one of the nicest guys you'll ever want to meet.
And he always is. He always responds to your tweets. I've reached out to him a couple times, and and I sometimes I DM him on the off chance, and we don't chat like we're best friends, but he always sends kind words, just like I send kind words, and and he really talked about this last issue of GL12 being, he put a lot into it, and I can only imagine what the work is like for an artist. Deadlines are one thing, but when you look at art like Liam Sharp's in these issues and these books and stuff, and you got to understand a deadline to him might be an altogether different deadline for us, because I could never fathom being able to do this good of art, and what he does and how much time he spends doing it. That's one question I'd always be curious to ask. How long does it take for him to get a simple project like this done, which is not simple by any means. I mean, with your panel presentation, to your interplay with all the pages put together. I mean, it's just a gargantuan task just looking at these books, because you and I've read a lot of comic books, and not a lot of them are put together like this.
No, and early on in this series, he didn't do the color work, but here he's doing almost all the art chores. I think the only thing he's not doing is the lettering. So the biggest kudos and tip of the hat to Liam Sharp, because I have so much respect for somebody who can put in the kind of effort he has and get the kind of workmanship and craftsmanship that he brings to this issue, and as he has all the issues before here.
And what about that Hector Hammond? And getting into the mind of Hector Hammond. I mean, the way he portrays it in his art just really, really shows that you feel like you're getting into that guy's head.
There's one panel where, that whole section where he goes, my Carol, cruel Carol Ferris, I'm better off without her. The look of lament on Hector Hammond's really gigantic melon is really, really well done. And there's a lot of neat images like that throughout this issue. The story, if you look at it just on a purely plot level, is not overly complex. This is Hal going against the fight against the overwhelming odds, just like any other superhero book, overwhelming odds, and Hal comes out on top. But there's a lot of things that are being said in here that you can look at it through multiple lenses. Looking at what some of the comics fans have been saying, some people look at it as this is Hal throwing off the cumbersome parts of the past and stepping aside and moving on and letting other people take over. Other people like myself looked at it a different way. So I'm really interested in hearing how or what themes or what things you think Grant Morrison might be saying in kind of the metatextual part of this series, this issue in particular.
Well, I mean, the ending kind of said it the most. I mean, right with what happened at the very, very end, that was kind of like a surprise to me. But then again, it was only surprising to me for like, oh, that was the end? Wow, okay. But then I got to think about it. I was like, that makes sense why that's the end. I mean, if you juxtapose that next to, Grant Morrison, and this being his last book that he's doing for DC, I mean, it kind of makes perfect sense why they would end it on that note. I mean, because, at the same time, it's just Hal Jordan flying away and he disappears when somebody's talking to him, and it's where Hal Jordan goes is anybody's guess. But you and I have been around long enough to know that, it's always been our guess where Hal Jordan goes on his next endeavors. I mean, because you're coming off 2 years, of this standalone type of issues that have been written by Grant Morrison and Sharp. And, it's anybody's guess what's going to happen to the character. And I think it's like a nod to the next person to say, here's Hal Jordan, he's flying off, he hasn't made a commitment to anything besides a commitment to himself. And that's why I think they left it.
Right. There's kind of hints that, Hal was going to be first to retire, but that isn't what happens at all. And in the end is left rather open-ended. It's left almost for the reader to decide what happens to Hal. Because like you said, he's there 1 second and he's talking to Guardian Sal, and she turns to him and everybody looks and he's gone and he's off flying through space. What that means is anybody's guess, really. But there are some things, I want to go back to some particular pages and some comments and things that are said. Yeah. Back in that same page where Hector Hammond is lamenting over Carol, the narrator says something which I thought was really interesting at the bottom of that page. And the narration goes, "This is the tale of the world's ending, a tale of deals that were made and broken, of lies told for the good of all, and of change that had to happen."
That's subtle.
I'm not exactly sure what he's talking about there, but one could think of it as, is this him talking about his own treatment by DC? Is this him making commentary about the way the industry has changed around him? Because in some ways, I think that maybe Grant is using Hal as an avatar for himself in some ways.
I mean, I guess if you really, really take yourself outside the box and think about it, I mean, that would be Grant Morrison's style. I mean, not only to represent himself. Well, okay, let's think about it like this. And I was gonna bring this up in a later point, but I mean, the whole entire two year run of this particular Green Lantern book has felt like to me, it's felt like a standalone. I mean, I read other DC books, and Hal Jordan didn't appear in a lot of other things, but primarily he appeared in this. The whole entire time looking back, I always felt like, okay, this is encapsulated in its own self. It's done its own thing for 2 years now. Or contextually, the artist and the writer have done their own thing for 2 years now with this particular character. Mind you, touching into only small aspects of the Green Lantern Corps in itself, the Guardians for that matter. They didn't go outside of that box too far. They brought elements into it. But to juxtapose it next to Grant Morrison and how maybe getting into his mind feels, sure, he has probably a lot of reservations on how DC has probably treated him over the years. And the unfortunate cause of that is there's a lot of writers out there that have claimed the same thing when it comes to working for them. And it wouldn't surprise me for Grant to use this as his calling card, his coup d'etat, at the end, making a lot of those subtle, those little subtle remarks, this is a tale of the world's ending, and sure, it is a tale of the world's ending. For Green Lantern it is, but it's also for your world ending because you're going on to do other things right now. So it would make perfect sense. I'd like to get into his head, or I'd like to talk to him and ask if that's the case, but I doubt you'd ever get that out of him.
Yeah, and
I think it's a personal note,
Yeah, I think there's some personal things in here. One of the things that I thought was really interesting is that we find out that Vespero is called the Wasp of Glender, and there's some commentary about, well, was that supposed to be using the acronym, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant? Was that he's supposed to be an avatar for wasps?
Interesting. Yeah,
I thought that was kind of interesting as well. One of the things that was interesting was the whole thing, that the notion that the villains that were brought here are not really the villains we know. Even though we saw Black Hand and the Shark and Tattooed Man and so on, they're not real. They're toys. And I thought it was interesting. Is there some meta commentary about these characters as toys? That they're not real, and that people take them, Hal even at one point says they look like action figures. And then when Feck and Samandras show up, they are morphed into something so completely different than we've seen them. And there's some more commentary there where Feck says, we've suffered what they call the upgrade, which I thought was interesting because it's bolded. And the Golden Ones cast me as the cannibal comic relief, and she is the loveless transassassin.
Lovelorn transassassin.
Yes. And then she says, assigned a value, modernized as the best befits these modern times. And I kind of wondered if, is this a case of him making commentary about how the industry takes characters and turns them into something that they're not meant to be, in order to try to sell them, because it's all about commercialism. And again, this is me projecting onto it, but it's certainly some commentary that's the slant I took on it, was that he was making commentary. I mean, if you look at what these would have been done to these two characters, they look like they were recreated in a 90s fashion, the way that some of the artwork was done back then.
Sure. Sure. And not only that, but Grant Morrison has always, there's that point he made about identifying as non-binary, and it would make perfect sense of him to use this kind of terminology and imagery to project that onto people that, maybe he's encountered in the industry, who's to say? Yeah,
I don't know whether he's making commentary about the thing right now is to take things and change them and morph them into something they're really, they're not really true to the core of what they were, but, it might sell better. It's all about marketing. Mm-hmm. Kind of thing. And even at one point, Hal, says, I know our friends even, air quote, upgraded. They're still in there somewhere. And that, we've become but toys of the Golden Devils.
Here's your meta narrative.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. It's just interesting. And then, they go through all of this stuff. I don't know. There's just some interesting things here. Because some people make it look like, Hal is stepping aside and that he has to accept that what's best for Athmora is to let it go, to let go of the past and the clinging onto that and make way for the new. And you could look at the Young Guardians as being representative of the next generation of decision makers and creators, and that, they're going to put Hal at the pasture. There's kind of a narrative there. But then when you get to the end of the book, you have the Young Guardian saying, well, we were wrong not to trust you, and we want to offer you a promotion. And that in the end, it was Hal's nature of being the tried and true character that he's always been has more value than his bosses think he has. Now, that's me projecting what I'm getting out of it, but other people are looking at it the other way around.
And he also says in this one point, my ring's running on Grail energy, and I have plans to hitch a ride to some passing comet, see where the road takes me. How long does the Grail energy last?
We don't know. That's the interesting thing. Now, we know if you go back and look at Future State number 2, Future State Green Lantern number 2, we have that Hal story, which by Robert Venditti, which doesn't really connect to this, because I'm sure, Venditti doesn't know. I mean, Venditti, when he took over the book, didn't know how Johns was going to end it. So certainly he's not going to know how this book is going to end.
Yeah, that's true.
But it's I don't know. I find it so interesting. There's so many different ways you could kind of look at it, because it's funny. People were saying, well, Hal's moving aside so he can make way for all these other characters, and I'm looking at it as, well, I didn't get that at all. I didn't get Hal volunteering to move aside to make way for other people. I took it as, Hal's still the guy, and he just proved it. They were ready to put him out to pasture, and he showed why he was the only one that could do what he was going to do. They had to be done.
Well, not only that, anybody who's a Hal fan knows he paves his own path to begin with.
Yeah.
So regardless if he's going to be in a book in the next couple of months or not, I mean, I don't think we're going to be putting Hal Jordan out the pasture and we're never going to be seeing him again. I mean, he may be gone for the moment, but you can't get rid of a character like that. But just ending it on a 2-year note on a book by an artist and a writer at the same. I mean, of those magnitude. No, I mean, at the end, yeah, he may fly away, but he won't be gone too long. No. He can't be gone.
There were a couple of times that Hal said some interesting things too. Like at one point, he says when he's fighting against the soldiers and they've got guns and stuff, and he's got his sword and his shield, he says sometimes the old weapons are the best. And then later on, he makes a comment that says, "Guess the old songs are the best." And I just, is there some kind of commentary there about, we don't need to flood the toy box with toys. We've got good toys already. We just need to use them.
Yeah, use the ones you got. And you and I have talked about that with the characterization of a lot of people that have written in comic books. It's like, the Green Lantern Corps. Why keep coming up with new Green Lanterns? You have how many to choose from, and you keep coming up with new ones just because they appeal to a certain demographic. Right. Okay, that's fair. I understand there's a point behind that, but at the same time, I mean, when do you call it what it is? Well,
right. I mean, I don't mean to pick on a book, okay, but I'm going to use it as an example.
Go ahead.
Why couldn't the Far Sector have used any of the other bajillion characters that are out there and told just as good of a story?
Exactly. And to maybe to answer that from a perspective of DC logic, because Jo Malene is a powerful African American female, and we need her to sell a book. And is that fair? Yeah, but it's not right. I don't think it should be its sole purpose. I mean, Jo Malene could have been in a book at any time and been just as popular of a character.
Well, why not use Horatio or Kyle or pick a character? It would have been just as good of a story. Now, yeah, sure, you might sell more with the Human Lantern, but again, we have Human Lanterns that aren't being used. Why not Kyle?
Exactly.
Did we need an avatar for the author? But again, we're digressing, and I don't want to get into that whole thing. But it goes back to the there are lots of toys in the toy box. Are we leaving ones there that have just as much value, if not more value, by continuing to add more, just for the sake of I'm a big board game fan, and there's a term in the board game world called the cult of the new, and that's where people glom onto what's new because it's new. And, a new board game comes out, and now suddenly everybody has to have a copy of it because it's new. And it's the best game ever because it's new. And to me, I liken some of this stuff to that. So, whatever. But anyway, we go through the story, and, the ring comes back to Hal. We get the relationship between Hal and the ring. And I thought there's interesting commentary here about, Hal talks about love and will, and that's a relationship. And there's some interesting stuff going on when Hal uses his ring to charge all the batteries in the multiverse at the same time.
Which has never been done before, mind you.
No. But there's interesting commentary because there's talking about the Ultra War. And you see the panel, and we were talking about it, I think maybe off mic, talking about it as he does the oath. You see the panel that has people calling each other Nazis and queers and TERFs and fat and why won't you die? And I thought, boy, the Ultra War of world versus world, state versus state, total fragmentation. We are in the Ultra War right now. All you have to do is go on social media and you see it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Especially encapsulating it in this one panel.
Yeah.
Just like it is. That's just how social media feels. You got those kind of statements being thrown out there.
Yeah, and it's not just, I think we have a tendency these days to, it's very much an us versus them world right now, and everybody scrambles to be on the right side of it, but really neither side is right because both sides commit the same crimes as the other one does. They're just as guilty of what they accuse the others of being intolerant. And you see it here, people branch the word Nazi like it's nothing these days. And the same thing, speaking out against people who are have different sexual preferences. Why can't we just all get along? And so you see Hal doing this whole thing, and you see this Ultra War thing with all this language here, and he basically uses his ability to undo it all. He ends it, essentially. But the war of everything against everything else, isn't that, go on Twitter at any given day.
Yeah, right. Exactly right.
That's what it is. So I thought it was interesting. And, there's this commentary, how do you heal the fractures? How do you mend the broken lamp? How to make its shattered pieces whole? Only love, only will, and only together. And to me, that's the strongest commentary in this entire issue.
Mm-hmm. It really is. And it's kind of funny because even like my wife and I were talking earlier about, this whole pandemic thing, we're coming on to a year of it now, fully. And, this is kind of an enlightening moment moving forward because, you got more vaccinations going around for people and stuff like that. And people will start getting back to their normal selves, in the months and stuff down the line, and hopefully, and her and I talked in length about how people feel, depressed, sad, estranged from their normal routines. It just takes time to get that back. And, it's kind of funny how this comic book, kind of puts that into the perspective about, what you can do going forward, only love, only will, only together. Because we've been in this together for how long now? Only together we're going to get out of it. And it's just it's a simple thing for people to understand. And, hopefully the message is clearer for those, too, that read this book as well.
And, getting back to some of the meta commentary, there's a scene earlier where Hector Hammond is describing the Golden Ones. And he says, their creed is mass production, mass consumption, and mass destruction. That is as much of an indictment over some of the corporate America. One could look at AT&T and
yeah,
there's so many things you could throw that on, and
there's a lot of layers there.
Yeah. I think that's the thing is this is a very complex story in terms of it could be talking about a number of things. But what I like is that we can all make our assumptions as to what it's about, but I think because Grant Morrison doesn't come right out and tell you what it's about, it makes it a stronger book. Because, like I said, some people looked at this as this was Hal, flying off and leaving it to other people at the end of the book. I didn't take it that way at all. Mm-hmm. I took it as Hal proved why he's more important and valuable today than he was 2 years ago.
Right, and both Morrison and Sharp have encapsulated him into a different bracket. This whole entire 2 years they've done their production. To me it felt like I said earlier. To me it felt like it was part of itself. And while I liked seeing Hal Jordan and other titles and other books and everything like that. It's always cool. It was always about the canon before, how did this follow what such and such was doing in another book or such and such was doing in another book. But I mean, Hal Jordan doesn't have to work that way, and it's clear. I mean, he's going on 2 years with this run, and how well this is done, and how well he has done as a character, and let alone the personalization that Morrison and Sharp put on him as a character itself. It's unparalleled. And there's not going to be another book like this ever again.
No. Now, when you go back to that, I got to talk about Liam Sharp's artwork again. That little picture he's got of Rikatoro and Trilla True and Volk. I love how he builds a facial expression into the smoke above Volk's head explosion. It's just interesting stuff. And that image at the end of him flying off, it can be anything. He's off to another adventure. He's got some time he's going to use to go out and just see what's out there, kind of thing. But I didn't see this as him riding off into the sunset by any stretch of the imagination. I thought it was a very triumphant ending, and I think it's going to take multiple reads of this book to really try to figure out what he's talking about. But the beauty of it to me is that I can pick up this book today and read it, and I'm going to read certain things into it based on the events that are going on around me right now, or the events that are going on in the world right now. I could pick this book up in a year from now and get something completely different out of it.
Yeah, you're totally right. On a side note to Hal Jordan flying off at the end, he does make a point where he has plans to hitch a ride on some passing comet. Well, in scientific theory, wouldn't he be a comet? I want to ask Grant and Liam that one.
It's an interesting ending of the book. I do think this is a series that reads best when read in a chunk, because one of the downfalls that the series has had is for a lot of readers it's hard to read on a monthly basis. Mm-hmm. And I would certainly say that is the truth, that it's going to hold up better. I would love to see DC do this as an absolute book, because I think Liam Sharp's artwork deserves those oversized pages and that kind of presentation. I'm really looking forward to it. I know. Oh, one question I wanted to ask you. There's a panel where Hal talks about Samandra quoting Fernando.
Which one? Which page was that on? I think it. Oh man.
It's when they say a Forath Mora for Glendor, and they're getting ready to go off in the further battle, and when we see the final fates of what happens to Vespero and Feck and Samandra, there's a panel there where there's a column on either side of the page.
Oh yeah, it has that writing on it?
Yes. I did not see anything online about anybody determining whether that writing meant anything. Did you hear anything at all?
No, I sure didn't. But I wonder if it has something to do with because you notice how the book kind of changes after that moment, because it's like that, I don't know, like they're telling the tales of the, Prince Vespero, and stuff like that. And then the book kind of shifts and changes after that.
Yeah, like some of the pages look like they're pages of a big book.
Right.
And I don't know whether that's just something that Liam Sharp drew there, but you know how I am. When I see stuff like that, I'm like, oh, it's got to mean something.
Best line in the book, though, for feck's sake. Let's have him.
We haven't gone into a lot of details about the story, but I think the story itself is pretty plain. I mean, Hal just goes off and fights these guys, and he does something really cool and flies off at the end. You could really sum it up shortly, but it's the messaging that's built into this and the layers and what is Grant talking about. Like I said, two people could pick up this book and read it and get something completely different out of it, which I think is a hallmark of a well-crafted story.
Agreed. I think my overall favorite image out of the book was the one that took place after they were telling the tales of those last warriors. It shows Hal Jordan, and it's got the ring front and center, and he said, yeah, here's the thing, Hector. Athmora 101, up close to the intelligence engine. The ring gets cranky, and I know because we've been working together for a long time. She doesn't do what you want her to do. and it shows him with his green eyes and his shadowy his face is all shadowy. You know what image I'm talking about?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. It's great. I'm looking at it right now. It's beautiful.
And then if you look at the rings are all crisp and precise. Did you notice that?
Yeah.
All of them are.
A lot of the artwork is very. I get a Mobius or a Frank Frazetta feel out of a lot of this stuff, but when you look at the ring looks very pristine and technical, and it's almost this whole thing of technology versus, a very analog world, essentially.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, there's just so much in here. I've read this issue 3 or 4 times over, and I can't put my finger on exactly what Morrison is trying to say, and I think that's a good thing because there's a lot to unpack, and you project onto it what you yourself bring to the table, and that's it's both good and bad because in some ways you want a definitive ending, but you really don't get one here, other than we know factually that Hal solves the problem and flies off at the end to go to another adventure, and who knows what that will be.
Well, not only that, I mean, look how long his journey's been this round,
Yeah.
He's done a lot.
So this series is over. We don't know where things are going. Obviously, we know there's no adventures for Hal on the horizon that we're aware of at this point. How would you, what do you think about the last 2 years as a whole, and where would you like to see it go?
Well, looking back, I mean, you and I were both on the fence going into this when it first started, way back at issue 1 in season 1, and a few issues in, and we're still taking it in. It felt like it took us about a good 3 or 4 issues for us to get really enveloped into it, and started getting the crux of how Morrison was going to write this book, and how Sharp was going to handle the details of it. And it's been a long time. I mean, 2 years is a long time to invest in a book. I mean, think about the creators of it. But as fans, you and I, we've gotten used to this kind of particular style. Each book that comes along, I mean, Sharp has upped the ante. I mean, if you go back and look at issue 1, I mean, issue 2 is different. 3, 4, they're never the same. He doesn't use the same types of art. He doesn't use the same types of structure. And none of the books have been identical when it comes to that. And he's always changing the mark when it comes to how he presents his artwork on paper or on digital, whatever you want to do. But the medium itself, I mean, looking at his, I've never seen an artist do what he does. Well, inside the panels and out, it's complex in its makeup. He far surpassed anything when I remember back to The Brave and the Bold. He was good. And I loved it. And I was like, man, this guy's amazing. But I never knew he'd come this. I shouldn't say it like that. I never knew he'd come this far. I didn't know his artwork would evolve in such a way that it has at this last book, and evolve is a great word to use here, because even looking at the structure of his books, it has evolved, and he's changed over the years, I'm sure, as a person, and it reflects in how much he puts his heart and soul into to drawing this book, and I'm going to miss it because his artwork with Green Lantern stuff has been beautiful, and I think we've been spoiled in a certain way. I'm sad to see it go, but I'm also optimistic about, another person taking over, not so much just taking over the Green Lantern title. I'm talking about taking over Hal Jordan. Yeah, because you and I, and any other Hal Jordan fan out there, whenever another writer takes over their favorite character, it's always something for us to pick up on, because now we want to see, okay, what's this writer going to do with Hal Jordan? Much like Venditti did, or Johns, or any past writer for that matter. Grant has taken this one in a different direction, and I think a lot of people were unprepared for it. But once you got into it, you're kind of like, okay, I dig it. This is cool. This is groovy. I'm having a good time reading it, and man, it's gonna be tough because you don't know what's coming next, and you know, you just wait because you know you're either gonna eat a bullet or you don't know what you're gonna get with the next person that comes along, and I'm gonna miss this one.
Yeah, it's interesting. You talk about the trepidation that you have when somebody new takes over a character that you're emotionally connected to, or you're emotionally invested in, and I remember feeling that way when Johns left, and we heard about Robert Venditti coming on board, and I didn't know who Robert Venditti was. I had no idea what kind of creator he was. I'd never read any of his work, and then when that first story arc came out, the Lights Out thing, and I'm like, oh man, this is going to be bad. And then it turned out to end up being a very good run. And I think that his, particularly the Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps series, I think was stronger. But I also think has a lot to do with editorial interference and letting Robert Venditti play with the toys himself without being told what he can and can't do on a month-to-month basis. Mm-hmm. That's part of it. And when I heard about Morrison coming on board, my first thing was, well, what version of Grant Morrison are we going to get? Because I think I've mentioned on this show several times before, I've yet to get through Multiversity, and I didn't like Final Crisis. So I'm thinking, man, am I going to get through this? How am I going to be able to survive this series or not? And what I really appreciate that Grant Morrison seemed to do is he really lives and writes by this mantra that everything matters, because I saw in his version of Hal bits and pieces of the different variations of Hal we've had over the last 60 years or so. I think writers come out and they kind of put their own take on it. I think what he took is he took all of their takes and combined them together, and we got a Hal which was true to everything in his career. And I think that's strong writing on his part. Were there parts where it was a little hard to follow? Yeah, but I by and large enjoyed it. I think that people who got hung up on not knowing all the references, you didn't need to really know all the references. I think it just added value if you did know them. Or in my situation, they were things I didn't know, and I relished the idea of looking up to find out what these things were. I didn't find that so much of as a chore, but as getting more value for my book. So I very much enjoyed that. In terms of Liam Sharp, this is not the first time that Liam Sharp has drawn Hal Jordan.
Oh, it's not. That's right. He did draw him before.
He drew Hal Jordan in an Easter egg in The Incredible Hulk number 426 during Peter David's run on The Incredible Hulk. This was in the days when Hal was Parallax, and a lot of pros didn't like the notion of what they did with Hal. And so Peter David did this little cheeky Easter egg in The Incredible Hulk number 426, where he had Hal Jordan. He was called Mr. J. And Doc Samson was his psychiatrist in a mental patient ward. And he's saying, he says, "Are you all right, Mr. J?" And Hal says, "Yes, but don't worry. He couldn't have harmed me. You see, my power ring protects me from mortal harm." So there's, it was a cute little nudge and a wink to Hal being in the Marvel universe, which I thought was cool. But it was drawn by Liam Sharp.
Interesting. Did not know that.
So kind of cool stuff. But I'm gonna miss this series. I'm not. I think I've been pretty clear. I'm not optimistic about where we're going at all. I personally don't believe that DC has any leadership right now that knows what they're doing.
I'd agree with that.
I think that the idea of giving a book to someone who is somewhere between internet troll and toxic fanboy, not a good choice. Not doubting his writing ability, although I haven't seen anything yet that gives me any hope that it's going to be good. But I'll give it a chance. I'll read it. I'm not buying it, but I'll read it. And I'll do my very best to put aside my personal opinion of the writer and evaluate the story for what it is and isn't. But I just don't think that DC knows what they're doing, and think that they're going to push aside all the characters that have created this franchise, whether it be Hal, Kyle, Guy, all of those guys, for the cult of the new.
I just think DC's on the diversity train, first of all, any writer that's following up Grant Morrison is probably not going to be the best, and unfortunate Thorne is going to have to take a lot of the brunt of that, You know, I mean, look what you're following. You know, I can tell you right now, his writing isn't going to be anywhere near as complex and at the level of depth that Grant has given Green Lantern. There's no way. I mean, I just don't see how it could be possible. I mean, I haven't read Thorn, so I'm passing judgment early. Now, could he prove me wrong? Maybe. Do I have hopes that he will? I have doubts that he will. I just don't think it's possible. But I think DC's on this diversity kick, you know, and the first thing they have to do is recognize, you know, and this goes back to DC history. I mean, their first African American superhero was John Stewart, Green Lantern John Stewart, you know, and I think that's going to be what they're going to run with, you know, and I think I mean, is it a good thing? Yeah, it's a very good thing. It's strong and it hits close to home when it comes to social matters. Unfortunately, I think some of the fan base has to take a hit because of it. Do I understand why? Of course, I understand why. If that's the main reason, then yeah, I understand why. And I'm not saying that it is. That's just my thoughts on the matter. And how more prevalent can you make it than having an African American writer writing an African American superhero, John Stewart, and making it a Green Lantern and making that your headpiece. To me, that just, from a sales perspective, that might be what they're getting at. I don't know. But like you said, what I've read so far, I'm not impressed with the writing at all. And, you know, you want to impress me, then give me context, you know, give me depth and characters, you know, make sure that you show that you know even who John Stewart is as a Green Lantern. Because the minute I pick up on a whiff of, that's not John Stewart, I don't see that's how is that John Stewart? That's when I'm going to say he hasn't read his source material. He doesn't know the character. He's just reinventing the wheel and putting his own personal spin on it, maybe. But I don't want to rail on him too hard because we're passing judgment when I haven't even read the books. But that's what I'm looking at right now.
Well, I think it's interesting that people think that John Stewart was DC's first black superhero. He wasn't.
Who was the first one?
Well, let's see. You had the Black Racer, one of the New Gods.
Yeah.
You had let's see, one of the Forever People.
That's right.
Viking. You had, let's see, character was called Flipper Dipper, part of the Newsboy Legion.
So I wonder if maybe their agenda is the fact that Green Lantern's one of their untapped potentials, and why not make why not spin their leader in that fashion?
I don't know. I mean, certainly these other characters that I just mentioned, they're not anywhere near the stature that John has achieved. You know, John was probably the first mainstream black hero for
That's
DC.
the way to put it, yeah.
Or the first prominent one. But I guess, I don't know. I think hitching your train to identity politics, I think that's part of what's wrong with our culture right now, is that we're so invested in identity politics that we're not thinking clearly. But whatever. I don't want to editorialize any more than I already am.
Right. No, I get it.
But anyway, this series is over. We've got some listener feedback. I hope that people out there that didn't enjoy this book maybe go back and revisit it later and get more out of it. Because I hate to see people who maybe have spent money on this series and didn't enjoy it. So I hope they do get more of it. And I hope that our commentary and the dialogue that you and I have had about the book has maybe made the book more enjoyable or more palatable for people.
Well, not only that, I think if you take a step back from this now that it's ended, when you get it and collected, you know, and let's say you haven't read it, you know, get it and collected and read it, like you said, a full read through of your 1 through 6 even, you know, it's gonna be better for you to take it all in than it is to just do it in parts, because it is tough, you know, month to month going with the complexity of the writing, going one issue to one issue, you know, and filling in all the gaps. But like you said, if you do it all in one lump sitting and you're just sitting there taking in, you know, an omnibus this for that matter, you know, I think you're going to get more out of it. And I think it'll do it a lot of justice, especially if you haven't read it before or if you go back to it in that manner. So yeah, think about that moving forward.
Yep. Cosign, my friend. So we've got some messages. My power ring is blinking. So let's take a quick pause. And when we get back, we will listen to some listener feedback.
Sounds great.
Hey guys, come check out Two Dimension Comics, the comic book podcast with no direction.
We feature candid roundtable discussions about all things comics, past and present, with a killer soundtrack.
We like to include visuals of everything we talk about on the show. You can find that by going to bunchofdorks.com and click on the Cyclops!
Green Lantern Myron and Green Lantern Phil, you have incoming transmissions. Would you like me to play them?
All right, Phil, we've got some messages queued up. The Power Ring is all ready to let us know what we've been getting. So, Power Ring, go ahead and play the first message.
Our first message is from Jason. Jason is commenting on episode 136 and the discussion on politics in comics. Playing in 3, 2, 1.
Hello to my two favorite podcasters. I email occasionally when I feel I have something worth contacting you guys for. When I'm waiting for a new episode, I will periodically go back and listen to older episodes from you guys. I came across episode 136, Evil's Might, and you guys had a particularly interesting email from a listener who I will not name out of respect. I think you guys handled yourselves well in your response to this very aggressive email about politics in comics. I used to feel demonized with underlying political and social messages in comics. I've learned Superman has helped fight childhood obesity in the Silver Age, and he fought the Ku Klux Klan in the Golden Age. Jon Stewart was created to showcase the African American experience in the Silver Age. I wonder how much of us adults complaining about politics in comics is just a sign that we're finally old enough to understand the underlying messages in comics that have always been there. Myron and Phil, you both have been integral to my enjoyment of the hobby. I also run a casual fan page about my favorite character Lobo. When I saw Lobo at the end of Future State Part 1, ready to drink with Guy at the New Warriors bar, I beamed with excitement. I hope Guy and Lobo's relationship from the 90s is rekindled. Keep up the great work, guys.
Hey, Jason, thanks a lot for your comments. It's always hard to handle tough issues and talk about things in a way which is not going to be controversial. I think, and I think we talked about it then too, politics in comics has always been there, but I think there's a difference between the way that comics has dealt with them a little bit. Like in the past, I think no matter whether we are left-leaning or right-leaning, I think we would all agree that Nazis are a bad thing. So having heroes fight the real Nazis was not really a controversial political statement. So I think there's good ways to do politics in comics, and there's bad ways. And I think some of the bad ways are when we have writers who project their personal politics in a one-sided manner and don't leave things up to the reader. I think, for example, there was that issue in the 80th anniversary Green Lantern special that I took some heat over because I made a comment about the Simon Baz story and how they made a political statement because the person who was attacking the Muslims was wearing a red ball cap. So very thinly veiled commentary on people who maybe have conservative values and painting them in a negative light versus talking about something and making the reader think. And I think that to me is the big difference. Is there's nothing wrong with politics in comics, but I don't think that anybody should be hitting the audience over the head with the here's the correct way to think hammer, which is what happens more and more these days. The Ultra War is real, and its name is identity politics and things like this and topics like this that pit people against each other. And rather than talk about a common issue and bring about a way for people to have a conversation, we pit people against each other, which is never a good thing. So
not only that, but to also add, I mean, you can't control sensitivity, and a lot of times, people will fly out the handle because they take things too personal, or people will fly out the handle because of that. I mean, just get on Twitter for 5 minutes and you'll find that out. But at the same time, I wish people weren't so sensitive these days. I don't feel like I'm being personally attacked on by every medium that's coming at me, and I feel like a lot of people do have that kind of mentality or mental state when it comes to certain issues, and especially when you poke at anybody's political allegiance. There was a time in this world where you could openly talk about politics, and it didn't have to lead to an argument. And now you can't even sit down with family members and talk about politics without it leading to an argument. And I think that's sad. I miss the open discussions about things, being open-minded on both ends.
It used to be a more polite discourse, an intellectual conversation, and now it's an emotional conversation.
I mean, it really is. I mean, and unfortunately, that's where we are. How we got here, it'll be written about. How do we get out of it? We don't. I mean, you conform as much as you can to the changing social scape. And I think that's what everybody's vying to do. And politics notwithstanding, I mean, there's a ton of other issues out there that you can lump in with the politics one. And unfortunately, it comes out in the comic books, I try to see past it as much as possible.
There's also the scariness of everybody conforming to the same way of thinking, because
right.
We as a society need to have differing opinions. We need to challenge each other and grow, but we need to be able to do it in a respectful manner. And I hope that in our discourse we always do that. And Jason, I really appreciate you telling us that we're a part of your enjoyment of the hobby. That's precisely why I do the blog of OA and the podcast of OA. I want to create things for my fellow Green Lantern fans and provide a good experience. And sometimes it's hard when I'm critical about something, because I don't want to be a downer. I don't want to be one of those people that's talking down about comics, but at the same time, I have to have my own integrity. And if I don't believe in something, or I believe something is bad, I have to be free to say it. And so I try to say it in as even-handed as a manner as I can. And sometimes I'm human. I'm not going to be perfect. That's for darn sure.
And at the end of the day, too, Myron, I mean, this is your podcast too, and you have always shown that you make it family friendly. Now at times, does it get dark? I don't think it gets dark. I think it gets kind of deep. Sometimes you come out of your shell to challenge things you don't agree with. And I think that's okay, and I don't think you should have to apologize for that, because that's not the type of podcast this is. I mean, this is a fan-based podcast. You and myself are entitled to project our beliefs just as much as it is for any Green Lantern fan listening to us, because I'm still going to love that person all the same. It's like when I rail on Batman. Just because I don't like Batman doesn't mean I don't like you. I'll still love you as a person. I just don't like your character that you like, and I would never expect you to like all the characters. I like the Wonder Twins. Tell me how many people out there actually are a big, huge fan of the Wonder Twins. There's not that many. And I get made fun of all the time because of it. And it's fine. I can take that. But at the same time, it's give and take. We're here to support each other. And that's what fandom is for.
Right.
We're getting the Snyder Cut. Look what we supported.
Right. And Jason is a big Lobo fan, which I think Lobo is one of the most awesome characters. I love whenever he deals with the Green Lanterns. I love the interactions. I like Lobo in pretty much every interaction he has. I wasn't fond of the redo when they kind of made him not the Lobo that we've come to know and love.
No, that was a terrible Lobo.
Oh, yeah, that was bad. That was really bad. But like Jason, when we saw Lobo at the end of Future State #1 meeting up with Guy, that was such a great organic thing. I loved it.
And on a side note, Jason, I will say this: I would like to see a Three's a Company team up of Lobo, Arkillo, and Guy, because let me tell you something, that book would be utterly amazing.
Wouldn't that be fun?
Oh my gosh, it would be just hilarious. I would love to write it. I would love to write it just because. I mean, there's so much narrative in that. Oh, jeez. I mean, can you imagine them all sitting around in a hot tub together? Lobo's bikes parked off to the side.
I
got Arkillo with the tongue hanging around his. Oh, it would just be a great book.
Those three. That would be so much fun.
Oh, I'd love it. I would read the hell out of it. All right, Power Ring. Well, you got another message coming in, it looks like.
The next message is from JP, whose comment comes to us from YouTube. JP's comment is about the usage of Hal Jordan in comics and media.
More on the future of Green Lantern talk. We are on the same page, as brought up in your conversation. Hal should be the focus of the Green Lantern brand, but it seems that our best hope is that in the comics Hal gets a mini or something announced sometime after the release of the final issue of the Green Lantern. In the live-action world, our best hope is that the movie, If it is still on the table, it's still going to be focused on Hal and John. Our hope is on the movie since it seems that the HBO Max show looks to be focused on Guy, and I am assuming the new Earth Lanterns that DC is pushing. If this is the case for live action, and we have to pick our poison, I think I prefer that Hal is in the movie over the show.
All right, JP. Yeah, thanks for the comments. I agree with you. I would like to see Hal the focus of the GL brand, but I mean, much like I said earlier, I mean, who knows what's going to happen to the character moving forward, I mean, I'll be honest, I'm a Hal Jordan fan, and I want to see a book by him. But at the same time, I also have to suffer the consequences of my comments, because we've always talked about giving other Lanterns a time to shine, much like Kyle Rayner or Guy Gardner, and maybe it's just that time for another Lantern to shine. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if that's the reason for it, but that's how I'm going to kind of compartmentalize it, to kind of reason with it myself, just to take a side note. Maybe Hal Jordan's just taking a little break, and Jon Stewart's going to step up to the plate for a little while. But the HBO Max show is promising, though, so at least we'll see Hal Jordan in that. What do you think?
Yeah, there's a rumor out there right now that supposedly Hal Jordan may show up near the end of season 1 in the HBO Max show, which I don't know whether that means there's a problem with the Green Lantern Corps movie, because we haven't heard diddly squat about that in months. So,
right.
Who knows what's going to happen. I think, we talk about, one character moving aside for another one to rise. I've never understood why they can't all rise at the same time. I mean, we used to have a day and age when we had 5 different books.
Right.
DC's down to publishing maybe 35, 40 books, and half of them are Batman books. If Batman can have 20 books, why can't Green Lantern have 3 or 4? If you're going to create more toys, you got to give them sandboxes to play in. And there's no reason why you only can have one being in the spotlight. Why not have more than one? Why not an anthology book where you can see and be introduced to characters that don't get any panel time because they're not human? I don't know why we can't have all of it. I think DC is letting money slip through their fingers because there's an audience out there for it. I think at one time, if you go back and look at the height of the Johns era, when we had all of these different books, the only reason why that went away was because DC mishandled the property when Jeff Johns left. No disrespect to Robert Vindy. I have a huge amount of respect for him, but he was really relatively unknown. And Van Jensen had never done a mainstream comic in his entire career up to that point. So you had two people who were, you went from Jeff Johns and Peter Tomasi to two guys that were relatively unknowns. And that's, I think DC just mismanaged the franchise. And so then, you built it on a situation where you didn't have the staying power. And so it started to collapse upon itself. No reason why you can't get it back, but you got to build it. You got to build it up, not pit people against each other, and not keep adding toys to the toy closet, and never dust off the ones that are tried and true.
True. Teen Lantern, take a hint and go away.
Yes, please. So I agree with you completely, JP. So we got one more left. Go ahead, Power Ring, and let us hear this one.
Our last message for this episode comes from Rilo, also by way of YouTube. Rilo has a question about the connection between our Green Lantern Corps and some inferior group called the Lensman. Playing in 3, 2, 1.
Any chance you two have heard and know a good deal on the Lensman plagiarization possibility?
This is a neat topic, and thank you, Rilo, for bringing it up. This came via YouTube. For those that don't know what Lensman is, Lensman was a series of novels that was created. It predates Green Lantern. It was done. The first story appeared, I want to say, 1940s, 1930s, in Amazing Stories. And then in 1950, there was a book called The First Lensman, and it went on for a while. And there were several other books, but the plot of the whole thing began with a group of characters called the Lensmen who were part of the Galactic Patrol, and they patrolled space. Sound familiar? So there's always been this underlying thing of how much did John Broome and Julia Schwartz borrow from the Lensman concept. And the added layer on this is that for those that may not know, Julie Schwartz, prior to working for DC Comics, was a book agent, and he was a big sci-fi fan. In fact, he helped bring around a lot of works that were published under his tutelage. He brought some of the H.P. Lovecraft books, some Ray Bradbury books, a number of authors he kind of brought to the forefront in his publishing career prior to going and working for DC Comics. And he knew the author, his author's name was E. Doc Smith. And they met, they traveled in some of the same circles. So there was always this thought was, well, did Julie Schwartz kind of steal the idea for the Green Lanterns from the Lensman? And there was never any outright plagiarism claims, but there's always been certainly some analogy there. And when asked about it, Julie Schwartz said he'd never read the books, even though he had met the author. He had never read any of the material, trying to basically allude to this being a case of people thinking alike or taking inspiration, but because he never read it, he couldn't have drawn inspiration from it. People have drawn inspiration from the Lensman, though. I know that George Lucas mentions E. Doc Smith as one of his inspirations for Star Wars. Is one of the people that, in one of the series of books, which kind of colored where the Jedi and all that stuff came from. So, there's a lot of homages to that. And one of the interesting things is that when Mike W. Barr was writing Green Lantern, he created two characters that are directly inspired from Lensman, which kind of, I want to say in terms of maybe, the urban legend thing tied this connection together. But Aricia is an example. Aricia Robb is named after the Aricians from the Lensman series. And
Interesting.
Her last name, Robb, is Mike Barr's last name backwards. So
it's fun.
So that was a direct reference. And then there was another race of beings called the Edorians. And you may or may not remember, but there's a Green Lantern named Edor, named after that same character.
Huh. That's really interesting.
But there's been a lot of things that people have drawn from the Lensman, because this is one of those first cases of creating the notion of a galactic patrol force or things like that. And so there's been a lot of people that have drawn inspiration from that. And there's a lot of things that come out that look like they're directly drawn from it. But there was never any direct plagiarism claim.
Well, not only that, I mean, the 50s was a haven for like science fiction, and I mean, and stuff was going around all the time. I mean, even when you look at something simple as in when Back to the Future, when he was laying on that bed and he had that comic book or whatever it was, that sci-fi book, and it looked like Darth Vader. Of course, he was standing there in that hazmat suit and he looked just like the comic book. I mean, all them kind of ideas were floating around everywhere. I mean, there's not a few and far between where somebody might have picked up on this and said, it'd be great to make a comic book out of it. And sure, that probably happened. But at that time, copyright infringement wasn't really at the height that it is now, and creator content was free flowing back at that time.
There was almost going to be a live action movie based on the Lensman.
That would be cool. I mean, I'd be totally digging watching that. I'm actually thinking about reading the book, the first Lensman.
Back in the early 2000s, Ron Howard was negotiating for rights to shoot a movie.
Oh, that'd be cool. I mean, it sounds like a cool idea, but of course it does, because I'm a Green Lantern fan. I see a lot of comparisons.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting is, I don't know whether you're familiar with J. Michael Straczynski, but he wrote Superman for a while, wrote comics. He was the creator of Babylon 5. And he was actually working on that project with Ron Howard. And he indicated that Universal Pictures scrapped the whole thing because it was going to be too expensive.
What year was that? Do you remember?
That was, I want to say, back in 2008.
Yeah, probably be more expensive now.
Yeah, it'd be interesting, though. You look at things like The Mandalorian and you think about, what's not possible anymore.
Yeah, that's true, too. Yeah, that's true.
That's
really cool. I'm glad you brought this up. I didn't have a lot of knowledge in this either, Rilo, and I'm glad you enlightened me on this. This is cool.
Yeah, it's an interesting set of parallels, but I don't liken it to being any more than that. You know, like you said, a lot of people had a lot of very similar ideas around the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And it because of Julie Schwartz's connection to the sci-fi world, it wouldn't be at all surprising to think that their paths would cross, and they certainly did. But it was never anything that was, you know, done on purpose.
Yeah, I don't think it was any malicious intent.
Yeah, I mean, Julie Schwartz denied any connections to it, and people who have talked to Julie Schwartz felt like, you know, yeah, he didn't have anything to do with it as far as they could tell. But he was a science fiction agent, so he handled, you know, Robert Bloch and Ray Bradbury and H.P. Lovecraft, and he also did some of the first zines. He was good friends with what was his name? Forrest J. Ackerman. I don't know if you know who Forrest J. Ackerman is, but
I don't think I do.
He was huge sci-fi fans, and they did fanzines back in the day. All kinds of things. He just was one of those. But he won an award in 1962 for best editor.
That's really cool.
Not for comics, but for sci-fi books.
That's cool.
But
that whole sci-fi era was probably just man. It would have been cool to live through that. You know, just the height of that whole science fiction movement.
Yeah, Cold War sci-fi is interesting stuff.
Yeah.
But
yeah, it's good.
I appreciate, again, all of our listeners who provide us with feedback. Power Ring, why don't you go ahead and tell everybody how they can be a part of the show?
You can become a part of the show by leaving a message up to 1 minute long on our voicemail line. Call us at 406-POD-OA. That's 406-763-6362. You can also email us at podcast@blogofoa.com. We'd love to hear from you.
All right, Power Ring, thank you so much for that. And Phil, my friend, this is the end of another episode.
It is. End of an episode, end of a 2-year series, you know, a maxi series. And I guess in brightest day, right? I guess we got to look forward to the next adventures.
That's right. And I appreciate all of our listeners who have stood by us through this extra-sized episode as we talk about the end of an era. And again, I hope for people who maybe didn't enjoy the series as much, because I think for a lot of fans it was a little hard to read. I hope you give it another shot if you kind of walked away from it, maybe when it comes out in a collective format. So,
yeah, agreed.
We should be back. There's not another book this month. The Green Lantern book doesn't come out. The new book doesn't come out until next month. So we'll have to do a retro review later on in this month, or maybe we'll do something different. I don't know. We'll have to think about it.
Okay, sounds good. I'm up for anything.
All right, my friends. Well, until next time, as always, treat each other well, keep that power ring charged, and make every day your brightest day. The Podcast of OA is the official podcast of the Blog of OA and a proud member of the Comics Podcast Network. Share your comments and questions by calling the show's voicemail line at 406-POD-OA. That's 406-763-6362. You can send your emails to podcast@blogofoa.com. You can also find the Blog of OA and the Podcast of OA on Twitter and Facebook. Green Lantern and other related characters are the copyrighted property of DC Comics Incorporated and are used without permission. The Blog of OA and the Podcast of OA are fan productions and do not claim any ownership over the Green Lantern or any other copyrighted properties.